there's a touch of something that the Bible articulates in a very interesting and colorful way, yet it is more so for our personal devotional conversation. That personal touch doesn't really seem so personal in the way that it's given. And in the way that it's given in a way that is read, I will bring back your captivity. So there's a theme within the Bible. There's a consistent theme within the Bible, and it has to do with bringing back from enslavement, bringing back from captivity. So you think about the Exodus, or the example of the Exodus. Why did it take, it says in Genesis 400, and in the New Testament it says 430. Why did it take between 400 and 430 years for us to read in Genesis, I have heard their cries? Why did it take so long for the author of the book of Exodus to place into their narrative, after hundreds of years of captivity, of hardship, hard labor, of slavery? Why did it take so long for the author of the book of the Exodus to write that their Lord heard their cry? Why did the crying swell up so high? Why did it take so long? And I think that's a valid question. I think that's a valid question because it moves the critical observer to question the meaning behind the action. In the letter to Timothy, Paul is writing, or the author of the book of Timothy is writing, and is saying to Timothy, forgive my absence. And forgive my absence because I have taken so long to return a word back to you, so that you may know how you ought to behave in the house or the church of God. And I think that same concept can fit into the Exodus. Because the way that things work, from according to the narrative that is within the Bible, from how things work, is that there is an allowance of enslavement, there is a period of grief, there is a cry for deliverance, deliverance, there's settlement in a new land where there is no slavery and where all things are already provided. All you have to do is live. Only key is you have to be able to get rid of the inhabitants that are in that terrain in order to have the pleasure that they have already had prior to you invading their territory. That's how the Bible works. Bible works basically foundation of slavery, and then from that foundation a home is built and a construction is developed, an environment is now flourishing to where there is well-being. And you have to wonder why the Bible works this way. And I think weeks ago, the answer being skin in the game. Phrase just in my head. The Exodus is an example of not the magnification of a people. That's not what the Bible tells us the Exodus was about. The Exodus, on part, was for Pharaoh. That, as it says in the book of Romans, through you, my power will become manifest and my name expressed throughout the entire world. So you have the Exodus, you have a people willingly led in to slavery, or at least from the narrative that is there, they are led into slavery and their God allows them, is what I mean by willingly. Their God allows them to be enslaved for a certain period of time. And only when they cry so loud and so hard are they finally gaining the acknowledgement of their God, their deity, to do something about it, to raise up an individual to do something about it on that deity's behalf. So that's basically our experience. When you break that down, we are to pass through an experience of an exodus. Our scheme of devotional growth and development is the same scheme of Israel, being willingly, or should I say, being allowed captivity, whether willingly, I should say, whether willingly or unwillingly, whether consciously or unconsciously, Israel suffered captivity and they were allowed to. You would think that, it's always saying, because of the promises of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I have remembered your fathers and have not allowed you to suffer this, or I have remembered your fathers and am now doing this. You know, for some reason that just didn't cut it, and they were allowed, their deity stepped away from them and hid his face from them and allowed them to suffer uh, slavery. That's really us. And that's us only due to the fact that when we have something that calls us to the scriptures, when we find something that we know that this is it, the Bible is it, there's something in it that's for me, I'm hearing this for a reason. That's all good and well. We don't really stick to that. We usually enter into some sort of denominational theory, and that becomes our God. That becomes our ideology, that denominational theory, and we lose sight. We actually lose sight of the initial reason for why we think or believe the scriptures to be everything and more to us. Well, in that sense of forgetting and then either inheriting or adopting a belief, we begin to compartmentalize the experience. We begin to pick that experience apart by certain beliefs that we believe or don't believe, by certain theories that we can grasp or don't grasp, by what we can place together from our own personal worldview and of where we are in our life that fits. And so we have a belief inside of a belief. We are a denomination within a denomination. And so we begin to categorize what is and is not legitimate belief. And it is this categorization that we end up building up opinions and the strengthening of those opinions by theories and then mixing those theories with verses to set them into concrete, and then all of a sudden our experience has become categorized into something that we can feel is real and legitimate. That compartmentalization, that's the only thing really that feels real to us, and that's the only thing that we can latch on to because we want control. We want to control an experience that we never really gave to ourselves. We never gave ourselves a belief. We sort of just walked into it. We never gave ourselves the opinion that the Bible is it. Something just happened and we happened to walk into it. But something changes when we walk into our experience to where we now believe we need to control it. I need to control what I'm believing. I need to control this. And it's, there's many ways you can why we do this, but keeping it simple, just as being human, this is just what we do. We want to categorize everything. Being human means categorizing from healthy, unhealthy, from what is personal to what is outside of us, categorizing people by how they look, by how they sound, categorizing an experience from what a previous experience has led us to think of the present experience. So, categorization is just what we do. And it's this categorization that actually leads us down a road of delusion and then religious or spiritual, doctrinal theoretical, philosophical, devotional, deception, because it is then we live by our categories. We live by our categories. But the Bible's track record from everything that we have been reviewing thus far, the verses that we have been looking at, and then the real life sense or the practical application, a better way to say that, of what we have been reviewing, is that the Bible doesn't really support a categorized experience. And a categorized experience in the sense of an experience that is ruled by what is handwritten. And you can handwrite something without an actual hand writing something. That's the internal work that we do when we get into our experience. The Bible's not about compartmentalization life. That's a word. Stay making up words. That's in the dictionary. Feel it. The Bible's not about that. The Bible wants us to not compartmentalize. The Bible wants us to live freely. But the trick is, we are naturally going to categorize everything into just place it into a construction that feels right. That's just what we do naturally. That's just who we are as human beings. And as we're doing that, there's no God that's going to stop us. So we are given the opportunity to have a belief in something that is beneficial for what is inside of us. But at the same time, that experience is mingled with human impulse, thoughts, feelings, actions, behaviors, and affections. And so, what is happening without our having any cause to it happening, our human being, we are just subconsciously taking over that non-physical, that sort of, when you think about it, irrational experience. We're taking that over. And the moment that it happens, it's becoming categorized into things, and those things into things, and those things into things, and those things into things, until we are just a walking categorization of an experience. And then the categorization of our experience, we have developed definitions. And by those definitions, we rule our spirituality by them. So we are just getting further and further away from the genuine reason for why the Bible should matter to us, and we're drifting closer and closer to a compartmentalized definition of what our belief should mean to us. Sort of tragic when you think about it. It's tragic because something that is and should be a free experience, it's really becoming now a burden, but we don't see it as a burden. It's becoming a burden. And eventually in time, we will see that our philosophical opinion, that our devotional experience, that it is a burden. And that's really what's supposed to happen. Think about the Exodus, how the Exodus really took place, the show of glory of what that was about. Wasn't about the people, wasn't about Moses. It was about allowing suffering to get to such a point 400 to 430 years after the fact that you begin to cry out when you realize that everything that you have been compartmentalizing, everything that you have held as a belief, you're combating an Egyptian entity and it's not doing you any justice, then you cry out. And that's the brilliant part of the experience. We naturally, not we, our conversation naturally, it's led into an exodus of religious, spiritual, philosophical, doctrinal, theoretical slavery. Our belief, whatever we believe, it's actually naturally led into slavery. And just as 400 to 430 years slavery, and then a cry after, well, the intention is that however long it takes for us to cry out, we do cry out, but there's going to be a period of time where we are going to be engaging our conversation with taskmasters. Now, the difference is that the Exodus, the narrative has physical taskmasters, literal slave masters. We don't really understand who our slave masters are when it comes to our devotional experience due to the categorizations that we put onto our belief. We are completely entrenched, and it's exactly as Paul to the Corinthians says, you have many thousands of fathers and you have many thousands of instructors, sorry, you have many thousands of instructors in Christ, yet not one father. That's the experience. A slave master or slave masters via instruction, many for our experience. Yet we do not have one sure fire guide. Many instructors, not one surefire guide. So it is from our categorization that we put onto our experience. We build up a level of deception to where we end up in captivity and we don't know we're in captivity. And this is also an issue in the scriptures when you talk about Israel and Ephraim has gray hairs and they know not from whence they arise or for whom they are from. That's a verse in the Bible. And it's that same experience that is ours, but it's not physical. It's mental. And mentally, we give our emotion, the emotion that we should be giving to our conversations, growth, and development, we give it to taskmasters, to pastor so and so, to website this and that, to opinion this and that, to theory here, theory there. We give the energy of our conversation. Willingly we do this, and we don't know that we're doing it. We don't know that we're doing it. But we willingly give the energy of our conversation out, and we don't know that we are actually in captivity by doing so. And we are allowed to do so. There is no God correcting us from depending on Pastor so and so. Night meeting Thursday, Pastor so and so. Night meeting Monday, Pastor so and so. Website this and that. All of these things are delusional because we are giving our conversation to energy and to conscience, to energies and to consciences, believing that they will somehow convert what is within us, what is the energy and the conscience within us. So we're deceiving our own selves, willingly going into captivity, and no God is correcting this. However many years we are in our denominational theory, we're enjoying the feeling of it. We're enjoying the familiarity of it. Its opinion meshes with ours, and what doesn't mesh with ours, we're not getting too offended at it. We're just trimming it to where it needs to be trimmed, to where our lifestyle can support it, and it can support our lifestyle. We're in it, and we are led into it willingly, enslaved by the feeling, taken by the joint or the what appears to be a joint consent in lifestyle via doctrine, dogma, theory, ritual, baptism, so on and so forth. And it becomes an experience that is not philosophical, that is not legitimate, that is not holistic, that is not internal, but is by human stimulus feeling. And so here we are, for how many years we are in our denominated understanding, in our maintenance of it as an opinion, enslaved, in captivity. But there's going to come a point in time in each and every single one of our experiences where the categories that we have categorized our experience in and to fit, they're going to become challenged. They're going to become challenged, and becoming challenged, they're going to become annoying, and becoming annoying, they're going to cause grief. Whatever we're hearing about, whatever we have categorized to be our experience, is going to conflict with what we have been experiencing and what we have thought to be an experience. We're gonna feel Now, the taskmasters. We're going to feel that burden within. We're going to feel like we need to know something that is not being presented to us. And, there are individuals that remain comfortable in the paradigm of where their denomination has led them and are ignoring the inward pulling of their conversation to get them to dive deeper into their experience, to return to their genuine or their authentic reason for caring for the Bible. But then there are going to be others who cannot handle the grief that that causes internally. There will be others that can't handle that burden of my conversation needs to go back to what it needs to know and is not comfortable in the denominated theory that others are so comfortable in. My conversation isn't comfortable in the feeling of church. My conversation isn't comfortable in the feeling of what this individual is saying anymore. And in doing so, they're going to do something. They're either going to become atheists, they're either going to become skeptics, they're either going to become questionable believing still. They're either not going to do anything or they're going to take the steps to take the accountability and the responsibility for where they know their experience should be. And that's what happened in the Exodus. Got to the point where they could no longer hold their seasons of devotion that they were so familiar to from the times of Joseph and throughout those plush lands of Goshen. Things have changed. They no longer had the support that they had, and they could no longer maintain the same manners of devotion. And so it got to a point where they cried out for assistance. In crying out for assistance, they were led through a process to where their captivity was returned, and they were liberated from their burdens and were placed into a land prepared specifically for them. Now, that's everything that has to go on within us. The Exodus at this time isn't literal. The liberation at this time isn't physical. The location, the territory that is for our individual devotional experience is not a natural location. The experience is supposed to be within. And when we do realize that we have been in captivity for however many years that we have been in captivity to the religious theory that we have become familiar to, well then that's the time that we need to realize I need to cry out, because where I have been, there has been no God. Where I have been, where God should have been, he has turned his face away from me. He has allowed me to willingly deceive myself. I need help. And just as we got to last week, that's when we cry out for parent. That's when we go into the scriptures and return to the genuine or to the authentic pull, the genuine or the authentic pull that first made us aware that the scriptures have something within it. We go back to that source. We take what is in that source, and then we learn, however long or whatever principle necessary, and exercise it. Exercising it, we now have something to weigh against the already established categories that we have. So now what we are doing, realizing that we have lived a fraudulent devotional lifestyle, and now having material to weigh from our personal investigation of our source for that, or supposed source for that lifestyle, we now have something to weigh with the categories that we have developed. And what we're doing by doing so is we are decompartmentalizing the experience. We're taking the wisdom gained and we're placing it to the category of which it is, seriously linked to or synonymous with. We're taking those categories and we're stripping them down. We're stripping them down and we're stripping them down, just as after Moses arrived on the scene, plagues started happening to that land of enslavement. Every principle that we arrive at, every acquired bit of understanding that we gain from personally examining the scriptures, they are to be a plague to the land of which our belief belongs. Because in all essence, our belief has been a land of slavery. So every bit of wisdom that we gain, it is supposed to be a plague dropped onto the synonymous category of what we are learning and of what we are weighing that with. So as there were plagues that led up to the eventual return of captivity, so there are plagues that are to lead up to the eventual captivity of to the eventual return of the captivity of our conversation. And again, these are plagues of understanding. These are plagues of understanding. We have to apply the understanding to whatever we have theorized, or to whatever we opine, or to whatever we have diluted our experience with theoretically. Whatever we get, we have to apply that wisdom to that category of belief and let the illustration, or the figurative illustration of the Exodus, play out in real time. There are no, again, this isn't literal. The Exodus that is supposed to take place is not an actual natural Exodus. The plagues that are to take place are not an actual natural plague of whatever. The experience is inward. The experience is inward. And the illustration that's given there is an illustration that's given for what is inward, and that's supposed to take place within first the heart of our devotional conversation, the heart of our belief, the heart of our philosophical approach. And then it's supposed to move forward to our human being. And that's how this works. So when we see first the enslavement, and then we see the crying out, and then we see one show up, and then we see plagues given, and then we see a leaving, and then we see a slaughtering more of nations for a particular land, and then we see after all of that the acquiring of a specific individual territory. That's an experience that is practically for our human being to go through. Our human being is naturally, um, due to the serotonin, the oxytocin, the different chemicals that are released throughout this body of ours, we are believing that that feeling is it, and that feeling is all, and we carry that over to our religious belief, and we don't know it, but we are not simply just a body of chemicals. There is a character or an essence within us that actually allows everything within us to do what it's supposed to do. And so when we allow what is within us to remain in a state of unhealth or disease, that's how we actually live our natural life. And religion, in a sense, because religion is so, because religion locks it down the conscience, religion doesn't give you the opportunity to think for yourself. Religion makes you feel, in a sense, comfortable and at ease because the human being naturally embraces ease and being comfortable. Well, it is how our religion affects the essence within us that causes us to then affect the individuals outside of us, and then our own human being, our own natural human being, in a sense. So while religion is locking down our devotional conversations conscience, we, in a sense, are locking down our human being's conscience and are willing to do so for every other person that we encounter. That's why, you know, some of the or a lot of the individuals that reach out to me, one of the things that they always say is, how come Christian people are the most negative people in the world? And then you have to go through, or I have to go through a breakdown of how religion works, psychologically, and how a religion, being a misguided human impulse, affects the devotional conversations conscience, and how that can fall back down to the human being. Well, then the answer is there. But the Bible does the reverse. While religion wants to control the conscience so that a feeling of human impulse can then guide the experience, well, the philosophy within the Bible wants to allow the devotional conversation to have a reprieved conscience, and a reprieved conscience from an informed conscience, so that then via that informed conscience, the human being can find a guide from that experience that it is as a passenger to or with or beside when the devotional conversation is going through what it's going through. So the flip there, these are two different lifestyles, these are two different ways of living. But the way that the conversation is to be benefited, or the way that the conversation can be benefited, as we have seen in the past weeks, just saying again, is that we have to, and the Exodus again is proof, there has to be an allowance of personal delusion. There has to be an allowance of personal delusion. We have to have some sort of stake. We have to, again, have some skin in the game in order for us to realize that we have something that we can lose. And then once we do lose it, once it's gone, what do we have to hang on to but the memory of the opinion or the theory that we had before? So we're left empty. Being left empty in an ideal experience, well, we're going to cry out for fullness. We're going to want to do something to fill up that hole. And there's again things we can do to fill up that hole that are negative against our body physically, that are negative against our body devotionally, or that are positive for our body, or that are positive for the body of our belief. And so letting or allowing the conversation being allowed to be deceived by religion in a sense, because that's just how life works. Um, the book of Genesis, chapters 1 and 2, they actually break down point by point how the perspective or the outlook of general religion is supposed to be what is encapsulating for the human being, for the human mind. Religion is naturally given for the human being. There's no escape from it. That's just how it is, because that's just who we are as human beings. Despite how physical we appear or may be, or things may feel, well, we are philosophically minded. And it is our philosophical mind that, again, guides how we naturally treat one another and then ourselves, and how we treat our lens. So, but the first two chapters of Genesis don't end there, because there's an apparent liberation from that. And this is a consistent pattern that once you get to the Exodus, you see its fulfillment. And that fulfillment carrying over to what is within. We, as human beings, have to go through and willingly have to be willing to experience an Exodus. And that has to, and that's really difficult for a lot of the individuals that do reach out to me that do struggle with this, is realizing that religion has deceived them, that religion has insulted their human being, and that their religion has not benefited them one iota as a devotional creature, and either also as a husband, brother, sister, father, so on, teacher. Religion has done a number on them. And so it comes down to why? Why am I going through this experience where my religious belief is no longer credible to me? Not only is it not credible, but it has insulted me as a human being. So now I'm an atheist, because this can't be how things work. I can't believe in that. So now I'm a skeptic. But that's the irrational human impulse that guides the conversation, right? That's the irrational, because that's what we want. We want an easy out. We want an easy out, and from that easy out, we can then gravitate to not a sectarian religion, but to a secular religion. We can go to a biological religion now, because that's supposed to make sense. But in within, we're still reaching. Again, in an ideal situation, the format of the Exodus lays out for us the responsibility and the accountability that we need to personally take for ourselves, instead of stooping um, to the illegitimate conclusion of being an atheist, or the illegitimate conclusion of being a skeptic. Why not take accountability for being willingly deceived? Instead of hating whatever we imagine to hate ideologically, why don't we just look at the ignorance within our own self and hate that? And don't hate that in a negative way, but hate that in a way where we are willing to do something positive to reclaim the lost time, energy, emotion, and feeling that we have. And that's what the Exodus is about. After that period of suffering, there is a period of crying out, a period of returning for the purpose of wanting to maintain a conversation that for some reason we just can't. And then after understanding a mind of deliverance, after having a principle of deliverance given, then we can pass through stages of plagues given to the category of belief that we have an opinion about, so that from giving those plagues of understanding that we will acquire when returning to the source of our frustration, those plagues of understanding that we will acquire when allowing the Bible to explain itself to us, personally and privately, we can have plagues of understanding to give to the categories of belief that we have. And from those plagues of understanding, those categories will be diminished completely. And this will be our liberation. And this will be our liberation to a land or to a territory fit individually for our human being, for our personal human experience, and for our individual devotional experience. And while individual does not separate from the character of the mind within the scriptures, and does not separate from the mind encouraging such an experience. So it's a full scope of what the Bible is, or what the Bible's philosophy wants us to. And look at it as the return of captivity, turning our devotional or religious or spiritual slavery upside down, which is regeneration, the regenerating or the resurrection of the conversation, moving away from what was denominated theory and then embracing what is personally uncovered. Getting over the fear of, I don't know what this means. Getting over the fear of, how do I know if my belief is right? Getting over the fear of all these really weird questions, because in reality, it doesn't make sense. One, and two, who cares? You have just been um, religiously deceived for the past 5 years, for the past 15 years, for the past 1 month, for the past 2 weeks, for the past 50 years. You have been misled religiously, holistically, spiritually, and you're worried about if you're doing something right. So the Bible doesn't really have a right or wrong, because depending on how genuine the research will be, depending on how authentic the care for exercising will be, we will always return to what is right. We will always have a right experience, because we are taking what is therein. We are getting the wisdom from it. We are pruning and purging it. We are taking responsibility and accountability for our experience. We are exercising. We are gaining health without thinking about exercising and gaining health. We are capturing without thinking to capture. The moment we think about capturing the experience, that's the moment we're frustrated. And a frustrated experience will always return to the habit of something routine or of something traditional. Yet, that's really not what the Bible's really not what the Bible's mind is about. The Bible's mind is about returning the captivity upside down, and in a way where the outcome isn't the primary concern, or the structure of the outcome isn't the primary concern. we know what the outcome is, or we know what we envision our outcome to be, which is a devotional conversation that is suitable to our particular way of living, a devotional conversation that is suitable to the mind that is within the scriptures and how that mind meshes with our lifestyle. A devotional conversation that's beneficial to us as a human being and also to its own self philosophically. That's really the outcome we want. That's really the vision that we're looking for. So, how we're going to get there is really what the main issue should be, not really what is envisioned. Having the envisioned vision is what is needed for fuel to pursue it. What is of the matter or of concern is what's going on in the present. And in the present, our conversation needs or is depending on who we are and where we are qualifying for an exodus, for a return of its captivity. And so what needs to take place is the conversation and our human being need to get real with one another. The human being needs to step away from the experience. The conversation needs to embrace crying out for assistance and assistance from no other individual except the source from where it believes its belief is coming from, and taking that experience, intimate and personal, and moving forward. Moving forward, developing material to place into what we have categorized as a religion or as a belief, and allowing that material to become a plague to our belief, a plague to add wisdom, a plague to add substance, to where our categories can no longer exist and we can freely swim in the mind that inspired the scriptures. Not as if it becomes our idol now, because not even the Bible tells us to hold the Bible as an idol, but that now the wisdom that we are getting from it, we can take that and apply that personally. And applying that personally, well, we can decompartmentalize what we have compartmentalized for a liberated devotional experience. Religion isn't supposed to run us. Despite what appears, despite what it feels like, religion is a human spiritual experience. And anything human plus spiritual is really something we need to stay away from. But again, it goes back to we won't know that initially because there is no God, no nothing to stop us from understanding that this is an unjust experience to our human being. So we willingly go through this deception. We're allowed to, just so that we can have an understanding of a prior experience that has been unprofitable for fuel to gain understanding of something more beneficial. That's really the experience that our conversation at a certain point in time will beg for. And so I think I will just end that there, to the point of our conversation understanding its need for an exodus. From the moment that our belief is conceived, being conceived within the religious world, the religious world is in and of itself unhealthy. Again, we don't know that going into it. The religious world is unhealthy. Our conversation being conceived within the religious world is diseased from the moment that it is conceived within the religious world. And the longer it remains in there, the more diseased it will be. Problem is, we aren't religion. We are our own individual character. And that means that at a certain point in time, whatever we have theorized, whatever we have opined, spiritually, holistically, philosophically, it is going to come into conflict with what is within us. At some point in time, it is going to come into conflict with what is within us. And then it becomes us to take accountability for that feeling and the responsibility necessary to bring back to the source that we attribute the experience to find understanding of why we're feeling that way, so that we can then have the liberty or the liberation that we need to decompartmentalize, having an understandings to be used as plagues to our former belief for further liberation, so that we can arrive at the territory of understanding that we need to arrive at to continue as human beings and as devotional creatures. So I will end that there with that thought because that's a major part of the creation that we have to go through as human beings. So often, um, everywhere you go, there is religion, whether religion is sports, whether religion is employment, whether religion is feeding in the gossip, whether religion is theoretical scholarship from whatever pastor, minister. Religion is everything, religion is everywhere. So whatever religion we are in, we have to understand that if it is becoming a routine or a habit that our minds can't get across, if we can't drop whatever theory that we're holding to have an original opinion according to our experience, we are in religious delusion. And being in religious delusion, well, there's steps for that. And the mind within the Bible gives us those steps. Turn the categories that we have about our belief into a sort of wisdom. And I'm speaking now in a sense outside of the devotional experience. Turn that into wisdom for those that are listening that are not wanting a Bible experience in essence, because it will all lead back, whether it is of the Bible or not, it will all lead back to a reverence for the mind constructing the living experience. And for the individual in a church, as I so often hear, that is not satisfied with what they're being taught or with what is being said, it's our responsibility to go back to the source from which we're hearing these things come from and to rationalize them, to make sense of them as individuals for our human being, because it is our devotional conversation that guides how we naturally see or perceive our world. So, with that, take care.